Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Talent Game podcast. Now, today is an episode close to my heart because I'm going to be speaking to a lot of people in the world of talent, HR, people, however you name it. Is definitely my role and specialism and where I've been working in. So I've three fellow people from games, and also one of those people has recently exited games, and we're going to hear about that experience too. But ultimately, these are all people that have been in HR leadership positions in some way, and we're going to dive into what that means. Also thinking about like what success looks like in that role, perhaps even how you hire one. So I'm going to hand it over to the three of you to introduce yourselves. I'm going to start with Marina. Marina, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So I have been in the industry, in the games industry for 14 years now. Before that, I was actually I was a teacher for 12 years. So I think that benefited me a lot in order to grow into where I am right now. So I started off my career in TA, and that's the majority of my career really, where I really enjoyed partnering with, the business and the teams to make sure to hire the best talent. And now in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been focusing much more on HR, and currently working for Starbreeze, so the maker of Payday, as head of people.
Great. And we also worked together on the same team at Epic. So we went through the trenches there together, didn't we?
Yeah. Yes.
Brilliant. Nice. I'll throw it over to Keith. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Keith Caswell. Currently I lead people and culture at a custom home builder called Inman Custom Homes in the Seattle area. Prior to that, I was in gaming for about 10 years. I was at 5 years at Electronic Arts, where I had a good opportunity to meet Joe Wilson, and work very closely with him. And then as well as about 5 years, my last 5 years was with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, so Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, and building up digital studios and growth in that area. And then prior to that, I was in tech, media, and I grew up in retail. So go figure. There's a lot of different things that I've done in my career, but it's been an interesting ride so far, and really interesting. But almost all of that in the HR space, except for retail. I grew up there. I was at the stores for an electronics retailer for a long time, and then I moved into learning and development. So that's actually where Marina did TA. I was in learning and development for a while, and then I moved into an HR business partner space after that.
Okay, cool. I love that. Also, we've already got two very different like early career stories into ending up in that space. And anyone who listening knows me well. Two of my favorite things in life are Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering. So nice.
You're welcome, Joe. You're welcome.
Yeah.
And I had nothing to do with any of the greatness that happened, so it's all good. So.
I know I have to just keep myself under control whenever I meet anyone from that has worked at Wizards of the Coast. And Joe, rounding us out, give us an introduction.
Sure. Thanks for having us here, Joe. As you mentioned, I worked with Joe a little bit, and Keith and I worked shoulder to shoulder for many years at EA. My backstory is I kind of went to grad school for labor relations. I spent the first part of my career in aerospace negotiating labor contracts, and then moved into the HR business space after about 5 years. So I spent 8 years in aerospace, and then realized that I prefer to make fake bombs versus real ones, and moved to gaming in 2010. So then I worked at EA for about 15 years in LA, Shanghai, building studios out in emerging markets in Asia, and then back in the US working with the exec team. Mostly business partner, but built a couple of COEs in the labor relations space once that kind of became a deal in gaming. And then September of 2024, I left EA to take a sabbatical to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And somehow found myself founding a company that's helping build and publish gaming studios in Africa to build games for Africa, the diaspora, and beyond. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that and how it ties to my past.
Yeah.
So glad to be here.
Brilliant. And we've thrown a third in the mix. So we've had teaching, working in stores and retail, and then aerospace to wind up into HR, and then beyond. That's really exciting, Joe, about the new business. Africa being very much a massive continent up and coming in the gaming space, right? Yeah. Great. So, hey, first question I say first question. I've asked you all to introduce yourselves. Second question I always ask everybody is, what are you playing right now? So yeah, we'll go back in reverse order. Joe, what are you playing right now?
Yeah, right now I'm playing a lot of games that are built by the teams we're partnering with in Africa. So the game I'm playing the most right now is called Orion KGF, which is a African comic style match 3 RPG. I will tell you that it's an amazing game that needs help to get past day 3 retention, and that's what we're helping them with. Try to get the game rebuilt. But it's a really amazing to see teams that are trying to build something who it reminds me a lot of the days of Keith and I working together with the PopCap teams, trying to build games but they don't know how to monetize them. So in a lot of ways, what we're doing with the teams in Africa is actually helping them figure out the form factor of mobile gaming, as most of them built for PC in the past. So it's fun, not a perfect game, but we're going to make it a much better game. So Oregon KGF.
Nice. I just looked it up. Reminds me of is it Puzzles and Dragons? Yeah, I love that. Like when you like combine those two genres, right? It's like match 3 RPGs, smash them together. Is that it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, it's just very similar. A lot of the teams in Africa are very inspired by Japanese style gaming. Interestingly enough, so very good catch there.
Cool. Hey, Keith, playing anything at the moment?
Yeah, no, I am. It's funny. At EA, I did a lot. Did a lot of work within the mobile business, and so. But I'm a console player at heart. So I end up playing. I'm playing with a lot of people. A little bit playing Arc Raiders and also playing Marvel Rivals. So spending a lot of time on those games. I also do a lot of first or third person shooter games too. Go figure, HR person that goes and does violent other games at the end of the day, which is fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a good sort of reprieve. I get to be able to go in and be competitive in some places and not competitive because I can't compete against 15-year-olds. It's just, that's all. So
yeah. And this is what I love about Arc Raiders is the aggressive based matchmaking. So if you just want to go in there and make friends, do that enough, you'll just put in those lobbies with people, which is yeah. I mean, I've been playing that game so much right now. It's really good fun. And hey, Marina, we have spent our fair share of hours online together, typically playing Fortnite. But yeah, what are you playing right now?
I don't think you need to ask that question. I'm still playing Fortnite. I think that's going to be the death of me. I'm hitting my like 3,000 hours of Fortnite.
Wow.
Yeah. So before I went to the US last week, I hit my 800th victory royale. So I just cannot stop Fortnite.
Yeah.
But also Payday. I'm getting into Payday, of course, because Starbreeze, we are kind of fixing the Payday 3 that we launched a few years ago. So I'm getting into that as well.
Yeah, great franchise too. And yeah, can confirm Marina is incredible at Fortnite. Yeah. I am not surprised that you've hit 800 wins now.
800,
so
that's impressive.
Yeah.
I play, I mean, people ask me, in your job, how do you have time to play so much Fortnite? I just don't sleep that much.
That's the trick to, gaming as a parent, or at least gaming when you're getting older. Is like, well, I could either sleep or I could play video games.
Exactly. And friends and these, that's the beauty of the online games is that you really connect with your friends all over the world.
Yeah. And, even a throwback to when we used to do our like people team Fortnite tournaments at Epic, which were very good fun. Humble brag. I won it 2 years running. So yeah, all good.
He organized and he won them.
Yeah, way to go.
Yeah. I like the caveat. That's good, Marina. That was good.
Well, the prize was always like free merchandise, and I'd just be like, right, what's the best way to get hands on more Epic Games merchandise? I will organize some into tournaments. That'd be great. Cool. So, hey, getting back to our jobs and what we do. I see our jobs, all got very different variations on that, and that's what I want to uncover. I think the world of HR, and I'm going to call it HR. I appreciate it's a bit of a dated term for it now, but it's an all-encompassing one. I feel like in some companies, they can be a bit of a black box or just like not understood, or perhaps people that you only talk to, especially devs' perception of HR can be very different than the reality. So I'd love to hear it like a definition of what your role is. So yeah, Marina, like how would you describe your current position?
So, I mean, I could give you a long answer and I could give you a short answer. I'm going to start with the shorter one. But to me, as head of people, it's all about enabling people to be able to show up at their best. And I think that's really the simple version, but there's so much behind it. And I think for me, I did spend 13 years in recruitment and I never wanted to do HR because I felt that processes, and there was just often such a disconnect between HR and the teams that it just didn't speak to me the same way as I got to do with TA, where I really could partner with the business. I could really be in the weeds of everything with them. So for me, as head of HR, I think it's really, really important to stay close to the teams and the people and enable them. And of course, there's compliance, there's well-being, growth, development, all of these things fall under that. But in short, it is really to enable people to show up as the best version of themselves and do what they do best.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, thanks. And we'll go into that longer definition definitely in a moment. Joe, in your most recent past in HR, yeah, how would you describe that role and lift the veil on that?
Yeah. So my time at EA a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, the way I always look at, business partner to head of HR type role is I look at it as the person who is kind of like determining in charge of the organizational attributes that determine success for the company. That could be leadership, could be engagement, could be capabilities. So really, you're meant to turn all the dials and know which ones you need to turn based on the situation you're in. Having worked in a mature company like aerospace, it's process oriented. In gaming, in particularly in emerging markets or in mobile, it's highly variable. So the level of each of those things that you're focused on really is dependent on the situation you're in. But it's really, you're sitting there with the leader, turning the dials on, what matters most, because sometimes it's speed, sometimes it's precision, sometimes it's, capability building, et cetera.
Yeah. So just to get into that, when you say like turning the dials, can you give like a specific example
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that?
Like,
Yeah.
when you're sitting, I've kind of view like with your COE partners, you're could fucking make, build, buy of talent. That could be a big deal. Or leadership, like depending what the situation of the business is in, you're going to focus on learning and development more in this situation because you have a build strategy. Or maybe you're focused on M&A because, the capabilities do not exist. They're not possible to build in a company. Or maybe it's all about leadership because the team is at a point where they have an inflection to go to scale. So looking at where they are at a point in time, figuring out which part of your toolkit or which partners, whether it's TA or learning, you want to pull close to at the moment. Sometimes it's steady state in a mature market. Compensation is not a problem or an issue. But if you're in China, when I was there in 2015, it was highly complicated. And my best friend was my comp partner. So it really depends on the situation, that diagnostic ability to figure out what your sort of situation that you're getting dropped into is.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that, Joe. Keith, anything to add in like how you define your role or most recent roles?
Yeah, definitely. I think two really good answers, and I think mine is connected to those in a lot of ways. I think I would describe it this way. I think there's a general view in the world that there's two different types of HR organizations. There's what I would call sort of a administrative and order taking organization, which is, hey, you know what, you kind of do payroll, and we need people to have benefits, and we need those other things, and those things are important especially as a smaller company. And then there is how do I drive business impact and drive change, and what's required? What are the skills and capabilities that we need to have in those organizations? And so that's the other part of that's like, so there's those two. And then there's like the people who are good at transitioning from one to the other. Because as you mature as an organization, as you mature as a game development studio or a larger corporation, you end up more on, and I use strategy relative. It's a loaded word in a lot of ways, but I think it's really around what are we doing to actually grow the business? What are we planning for success? Are we looking further out than within what quarter? Are we looking out like a year to 2 years to 3 years to figure out what do we actually need to be successful? And game studios, we know, like we're launching a game sometimes 2 or 3 years later. Sometimes 5 to 6, depending on what you're trying to work through. So it's important to have the right talent, the right place, and at the right time to be able to do that. And I think that's where I tend to play a lot is like, what's the strategy to growth?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that. And So digging a little deeper in there, and we'll go back around, reverse again. So Keith, you're saying about it being strategic. So what? Can you give me the example of like a strategy or something strategic that you would do? Because I think I can imagine someone listening in and they'd be thinking HR is the former of what you gave there. Like
Sure.
HR is just there to hire people, fire people, ensure they're paid. Fine.
Right.
But you're talking about being strategic with the business hand in hand with whoever that leader could be. And in smaller companies, it could be hand in hand with the CEO. Or the COO. So
Right.
could you just get
Yeah.
just one example would be great. Yeah.
I think one of the key examples is really looking at where an organization is today. So, for example, you might look and say, "Hey, we delivered a particular product, we delivered a particular game, we shipped. We're okay, great. We have some money coming in. The question now is, now what? Right? Like, what do we do?" And sort of there is that phrase, what got us here won't get us there scenario. And so it's looking at where we are today, identifying what's required for the future. So having a conversation with different leaders that are involved in those discussions. It could be a game, a game GM. It could be a studio head. It could be any number of people that you talk to, and then find out what do we think is going to be required? What are the skills, capabilities, and those sorts of things? And then do the comparison to what we actually have, and then build a plan based upon that. Of either, to Joe's comment, are we going to grow the talent inside the company to make sure they can adapt to those skills, or do we need to go, work with our talent acquisition team and say, hey, we need to go hire a talent that's important, that's going to help move us to the future. And when I talk about strategy, I'm talking about that sort of the organizational development of a whole organization or organism in some ways, to say, like, how are we going to grow and be bigger and better at what we've always done? And there's some pieces, and in a lot of cases too, it's also around efficiencies. How do we do that with the same amount of people? It isn't the goal isn't really to reduce people. It's to do more with the people that we have at the end of the day as well. So that's another sort of strategic component that we might find.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. And Marina, I was just going to come back to you, and this might be where your longer answer comes in, but you were saying about enabling people to do their best work. And I'd love to go into that specifically. Do you find some similarities with what Keith was saying there between, like, I guess, like the administrative and then the strategic side? Again, if you can give a specific example as well, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, this is, for example, at Starbreeze right now. I don't know how familiar you are with the history of Starbreeze, but it has been quite a struggle, and we had a very kind of poor launch for Payday 3, which I think was 22 or 3. And nothing really was done with that. Like no love was given to it. They explored, a D&D project, and it never really worked. So right now, the challenge that we're facing, and it's a really interesting one, but it's an old company with a lot of legacy. So one of the things we need to really reset and we need to do strategically, but it's hard because you cannot just switch a button on and off. But it's the culture. What do we want? So to Keith's point, what do we want? What does good look like? How do we want to be moving forward? Because it's not going to be the same as it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, 1 year ago. So I think that is an example of a difficult thing from a strategic point of view, is to how do we reset the culture? So that's one thing, and more is there's also, for example, how do we want our managers to be? Do we want them to be like super self-sufficient and be able to take care of everything themselves, or does HR want to be more supportive there and allow them to do more of the individual contributor work? And this is also, I see a trend in games. Like, I spoke to someone in the VC industry who told me that now VCs are betting much more on smaller teams, and we are, I think we are 65-ish developers. It also means that the type of people we have a different type of skill set, because they need to be much more T-shaped rather than experts. So there's a lot of strategic things to consider in that sense, to really be able to enable them.
Yeah, I love that. And Joe, I see you nodding along there, so I was wondering, like, do you have something to add to that?
No, I just thought it was a really, just a really good kind of explanation.
Yeah, yeah. Marina, I'm really glad you brought up the word culture, right? Because I think, in my opinion, I think a common misconception with HR people teams is that they own the culture, and culture is another thing that HR and the people team should be measured on. I said it's a misconception. I was about to say, do you agree that it should fall on HR's shoulders? So, Marina, you said obviously like culture is a big part of what your team does, but is it all down to you? And also, I guess the follow-up question would be like, how are you being strategic with culture? Because I know I speak to a lot of cynical founders in our investment portfolio that just think like culture is just something that happens when you bring people together, and it is what it is. So I obviously don't believe that either, but but I was wondering what you think, Marina, like about culture there.
I've got so many thoughts on culture because, as you know, Joe, I mean, I've been working for big companies like Epic and Wargaming, companies that have been around for a long time. But something happened when I joined Cult of the North, which was a small startup in Stockholm with a great team. We had so we raised money with A16 in the beginning. The concept of the game was amazing, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But what was interesting to see is the last 6 months of like the journey there, because they were very transparent with us and we knew basically when the company would close down up until the last day. And we removed everything. We removed all the benefits from the people. We had to cut down the pension. We didn't offer them any more fruits or snacks or drinks, nothing. It was just a bare minimum. It was just coming to work, working, and go home. And everybody would work their asses off until the last day. And that was because you mentioned like bringing people together and the culture just happens. That was kind of what it felt. But we did have very strong leadership, with, clear principles, with a very clear vision. So I think the tricky part culture can be established and culture can be nothing from the beginning. I mean, it can be so many things, but for us, for example, Starbreeze right now, we're dealing with 20 years of legacy culture, and then we need to reset from there. So it's going to be all about, how do we want to behave in the office? How do we want to work? What does good look like for us? And this is the process, the strategic process right now that we're going through, is to have these questions as a leadership team. What does good look like? What on a good day, what are people doing and how are they behaving? How are they contributing? So it's really, you can't really turn on a button and then you have a culture. It takes years to evolve. So the strategic work to me is super important from the beginning.
Yeah,
And you stick to that.
yeah. It was a sad day when I saw that Cult of the North was shutting down, because you and the rest of the team were so transparent, I think, on socials about sharing what you were building from the ground up and going through that journey. So, but yeah, thanks for sharing that story. Keith, do you have any thoughts on culture and and your role within shaping a company's culture?
Yeah, I think to your comment earlier, I think there's this question of like, hey, it's HR's responsibility to own culture, and maybe like HR's job is to know everybody in a particular studio, because that's going to drive culture, because there's a connection point. I'm like, no, it's everybody's job. Like there, and I think about it, it's everybody's responsibility to define what the culture is. But here's the thing: my description in often ways is, if you do nothing, there's a culture. Whether you do anything or not, there's going to be one. The question is it the one that you want, or is it a successful or productive one? So it ends up coming down to, how are we going to work? What are the couple, 2 or 3 principles that matter for our organization to be able to deliver? It might even be sort of how you define success in the organization. So this is what success looks like. And a lot of times, there's I can look working at larger companies that have multiple game studios. Every game studio has its own culture, like about how they want. In fact, they don't really want the parent company involved at all, because they're like, no, we have a culture of how we do work, and it's our special sauce. It's our secret about how we are going to go deliver games. I'm like, great. Like there's a certain component of like, go build and make awesome stuff and make it really fun and make it really cool. But what's the culture? Why does that matter? Is transparency one of the factors, right? Is it one of the key foundations of work that we have, that we're going to just be open and transparent about where we are and what's going on? We're going to be truth tellers. We're going to tell each other what's really happening. It's sort of we're going to be kind to each other and tell each other the truth versus nice because we want you to feel good about it. And I think that's a huge difference maker. And so from an HR perspective, the question is, what culture do we want? And then what are those traits that we then want to reinforce? And so some of that's with it could be money, the reinforcement of those things, but it also is in practice, what do we actually say? And a lot of times leaders will say one thing that they want, but they'll act in a different way, which then basically erodes the culture that they say they want because they don't actually act in the way that's appropriate.
Yeah, I've often heard the easiest way to quickly assess culture is looking at who gets promoted and who gets exited from a company. Where do you put your foot down and where do you praise? Could be a quick shortcut. But yeah, Joe, do you have anything to add on that topic at all?
Yeah, I mean, I love the answer you just had, Keith, and I think the culture is so tied to what you're delivering. So I guess the example I'd share is, I got dropped out in Shanghai, China in 2015 to figure out how our studio was going to actually make money. And, came in and assessed the culture. It was a very, very happy culture, 85, on all the, ESAP scores and, all that sort of stuff, making 7 games that were copycats that made no money and the bad development culture, but people got food and stayed at the office till 10 at night and were highly inefficient, but they were really happy. And we came in and realized we needed a different GM with a different attribute who wanted to actually build a game studio with the right skills, abilities. So we took the talent density down from 150 to 75 people, brought in the right talent around that leader. And now that studio makes what used to be FIFA Mobile for the globe. So the connection between, the density of talent, the culture you want. So happy doesn't mean good always. These people will, I actually said, get them down. If people are still at, 70% happy, that's pretty darn good. You're not, it's not you're not building a playland here. You actually want to have people that are motivated to do great work and work a bit hard and have a performance culture. At the end of the day, we actually turned the corner and the scores stayed the same level of happiness, despite the fact they actually worked less, but more efficiently, went home at 5 o'clock at night and didn't have to stay there and eat dinner. But that was only done by changing actually the leader. So working with your leaders, if you're a junior, person, people organization, that understanding and speaking truth, because culture is contingent on a leader. And your job is to coach them to the point that that it's actually not going to happen. At which point you may need to talk to somebody up the management chain to really figure out, can this leader deliver the culture that we need at this moment in time? That's a tough thing to do especially when you're a junior person, but speaking truth to your own leadership team is really important in diagnosing what the root cause is. Sometimes it's ancillary to the situation, the industry, or the location, but sometimes it's actually the leader itself.
Joe, you've given a perfect segue into my next point. So thanks so much. But you're giving some great advice there to someone, more junior or like earlier in their HR journey. So my next point I'd love to dive into would be like, what advice would you have? Like if someone's listening in and they're like, wow, Joe, Keith, and Marina, I want to aspire to be in a job like that one day. That sounds great. What advice would you have? Like what practical bits of advice in terms of like, this is how you become, a VP, a head of whatever, and perhaps some truths or insights they may not be aware of when you're within more junior level in that organization. But yeah, go on, Joe. Have you got any further wisdom?
Yeah, I'll see what I can drop here. I think, in the beginning, I think trying a lot of different industries, a lot of different roles is imperative. All of us have done lots of different things. And I think, your own personal desire, what makes you happy, you need to align that with the organization. So if you're somebody who likes to tune a fine machine, you might want to work at like the sports organization at EA or in aerospace, where you're basically taking a long project and you're making the machine run high efficiency, high caliber, deep engagement, and that's what you really enjoy. If you're an organization that's constant change, like when Keith and I worked in the mobile organization, you like chaos and parsing through the jungle and thrashing through the woods to figure out like what's the success could be. So you have to figure out where you like to be on the spectrum of maturity in a company, and then where do you like to spend your time? Are you somebody who likes to index high on business? Or you're somebody who really wants to unlock people's self-awareness to learn and grow? And so you might want to go on learning development. So what you like to spend your time on, you need to match to the role and the organization that you're walking into. So that takes a while to figure out, but knowing that your own motivation, you need to align that with the problems you're solving in the organization that you're living in. And if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. And that's totally okay. Like I struggle to go back to an organization where I'm driving someone else's agenda and making it fine tuned. That's not my jam. I would never finish building a house. I'd get it like 80% done and let somebody else finish it. So that's me. But I think that personal motivation alignment is really critical.
Yeah. Marina, what advice would you have for someone aspiring to become ahead of people?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe was really, really spot on. So I'm gonna take a slightly different approach. I'm just maybe gonna just tune into how I did it. And I think, me, I've always been extremely curious about, the teams working on the games. I'm a gamer myself. So hence I really enjoyed being in TA, and really be in the weeds of everything going on there. I think for me, the three top skills that I had to, how do you say, like grow and really well develop throughout my career, probably three. I would say adaptability. So I think like the industry is just sometimes such a crazy but wonderful environment to be in, but you have to be able to deal with all the ambiguity, with all the craziness that can happen there. The second thing is for me also curiosity, to just be curious, to be humble enough to ask when you don't understand things. And yeah, that was something that I felt really helped me take off in my career. And then the last one is empathy. As an HR leader, if you struggle with empathy, I think that could be a problem. And I'll just give you an example, because early in my career, when I was quite young, and hadn't been in games for so long, I was interviewing an intern for a programming role, and he could barely look me in the eyes. He gave me very short answers. And the feedback I gave to the hiring manager is that you can never hire that person. That's just weird. And that was my biggest learning, I think, just through my whole career, was to realize that I actually evaluated him as if I was looking at myself. And that was a big slap in my face, and a very good one, because I did learn, from that. But empathy is a big one as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Marina. Keith, anything to add there?
Really good answers, honestly. As I think about, like, if to your question really around like aspiring leaders or who wants to do this, I think I love the thought around, if it's the right fit or not, right? Is this the right culture I want? Is there a scenario, and understanding what motivates you, I think is important. I think there's a second piece, which is understanding how the business runs, how the business makes money. Because if you don't understand that, you can't have any. The impact is very low. There's activity, but there's not impact, right? So you want to derive the work that we do. I like to think of us as there's a clear ROI if we do HR right, and we do people and culture right. Then those are the components that it looks like. Otherwise, it's a cost center, right? There's a cost to run payroll. That's just the way that it is, right? Like, and so it's almost that simple, but it's understanding, like, what does that look like, and then how do you evaluate those metrics? I think also related to the business acumen, a lot of us don't know what we don't know, right? So you have to understand, you have to learn or figure out different things that I am not really sure how this works or what this is, or I don't understand that. So I need to go figure out, how do I gain that knowledge? So then at least I'm cognizant that I don't know all the answers for a particular thing, or I can even become an expert, or at least become better at it, and learning that information. And I think the last thing is, from an HR, whether you're junior or more senior, is around finding your way in to build credibility with the business leaders that you support. You need to build credibility / trust, right? Like, I think of those things as a key component, because once you build that credibility, you build that trust. Now they're willing to take some more advice. They're willing to come to you more often. They're willing to have some of those discussions. And the ideal state, honestly, from an HR perspective, is to be able to speak the needs of both the employee base that's in the organization, and what drives them and what's motivating them and what do they need, as well as what is the business direction and what's happening, and being able to kind of communicate those things from top down to bottoms up to be that bridge in a lot of cases, but to understand what those things are so you can actually do that. And with trust and transparency and openness, you can have a huge impact in the organization.
Okay, nice. And so following on from that, so hearing all three of your answers around what the role is, advice for more junior people, I'm just thinking about like, what does success, or how do you define success in this role? Because there's a lot of really nebulous, hard to quantify aspects there. Talk about culture, or being the best partner to the business, or enabling people to do their best work. All of those things. There's no one like number to say, oh yeah, I'm doing all of those things. So yeah. I mean, Keith, what metrics or anything or any reads, let's just say, are there for you to know, okay, I'm doing good work here, or the inverse, to be like, okay, things are not going right and I need to fix this?
Yeah. Good. No, it's a great question. And it's hard, because there is a lot of nebulousness in the work that happens. And, I think the default that a lot of people go to will be the NPS or the employee survey. Like, what does that look like? And are we moving the needle on one or more questions related to that survey? And that's good data, but oftentimes companies either do that once a year. Some companies do it longer than that. It's every couple of years, or maybe they do it a couple times a year. It just depends on the company.
Or I was going to say Joe's example earlier of the happy, highly unproductive office.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, I think there is this piece of, you want some friction in an organization because it shows you that the manager's doing things right. Like, they're happy because their manager doesn't actually hold them accountable sometimes. And so as an HR person, I need to go look at that. So the other metric I look at oftentimes is I'll go to different sub teams in an organization and say, hey, who's leading? What's the communication path? What does that look like? And then do an assessment in some ways around that. So there's some aspects you can do related to manager specifically, manager excellence, manager experience, that you would then go find, like, hey, are they productive or not? And then I think the other thing that's out there is sort of a team effectiveness as well. So is the team effective? And if not, why not? And trying to understand what it is. And usually there's different surveys that you can use to do that, but it's a targeted approach. It could be just conversations with people. And in those conversations, you typically will find out, oh, there is a person or a process or a tool or something that is just a mess. And that if we were to fix that, we would move things forward. And I found in game development, as an example, oftentimes I wouldn't hear or understand there was a problem until 6 months later. Well, in game development, that's eternity. That's forever. And now it's super hard to fix. And now we've lost all this money. We've lost all this process and transition. And we're probably not even going to ship on time because now there's a problem, and we made a damaged culture as a result. So I found I needed to go have more conversations with individuals and then do some assessment on a regular basis to find those out. So that's some of them. I'll leave some other stuff for other folks, but I think that's the main thing that I would typically do to understand. I say the last thing I said, business acumen before, business impact too. So is the work that we're doing growing the business? Are we shipping faster? Is there more clarity in the organization? Are we making money? Right. There's another, that is a key factor. Are we profitable? To Joe's point earlier, it's like, hey, a lot of people are happy, but at the end of the day, when we're making any money, well, that's what we're all here for. That pays our bills. So how do we do that and make sure that the company is actually successful and moving forward?
Yeah, Joe, anything to add on or build on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that answer, Keith. And I'll link further. So, like, for me, it goes back a little bit to our conversation on strategy. So going in and diagnosing, the organizational state that it's in, and working with their business leaders to figure out where they want to be in 3 years. One of my favorite conversations that changed the way I thought about HR and people was a leader in Korea, BJ Kim. He ran a studio there, and he said, Joe, why every year do you come to me and ask me what we should be doing this year? I build a game, it takes 3 to 5 years. What organization are we building over the next 3 to 5 years that aligns with my business? Which changed my mind entirely. I'm like, oh, that's stupid. I should have like a multi-year agenda. So my answer is, what success is actually setting up your own scorecard of what you determine success is and aligning it with your business and with your teams. And so that could be a variety of the different knobs I mentioned that you tune. It could be people, leadership, hiring the right people, changing the organizational framework, etc. But determining what those things are, getting a head nod from your superior or your partners on the exec team or business team, and then they're going to judge you on what you say you're going to deliver. And that becomes the razor also, especially when you're coming up through the ranks to sift through the weeds of all of the asks that come to you. You need to say, well, do you want me to do this that I promised I can deliver? Or do you want me to do the thing you just knocked on my shoulder today on? So that setting that your own scorecard and razor about what work you're going to do and what you're going to be judged on puts the ball in your hands.
Yeah. I like that a lot. My first instinct might be if you're setting your own goalposts. Could someone fully take advantage of that though? In that, I guess. But your point is that you're being held accountable though by other business leaders, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you want your executive leader to say, this is the most important thing. Yes. You're sure? Yes. You want me to, yeah. I mean, it's a brokering conversation. If you got to get comfortable with that, to have that conversation to really broker. That's what other like centers of excellence do in a business. Like, if you're the sales team, they have to agree with the product team about what they're doing and why. And friction's okay, but getting to that alignment is actually so critical.
Yeah. And I think back to, in my current role, I'm advising an investment portfolio of nearly 100 companies. And coming from recruiting, especially recruitment agency, is so like recruitment agencies are so black and white. How much money you made for the company? It's really like the metric, right? And then when you go in-house, the more analytics focused, thank you, analytics focused in-house recruiting teams are also heavily KPI driven, like time to hire, time to fill, how many hires you've made by quarter and by year. Even things like hires that were sourced, hires that come through application. Recruiting and talent acquisition, especially at the large company level, can go really in the weeds on these trying to quantify like recruiter value. Whereas now my value tends to be my team, the feedback from my team and the feedback from founders. And ultimately, if one of the top reasons that founders like us as a VC, like collaborating with us, is the talent support, then I'm doing a great job. Yeah. So I'm very much in the world of quality assessment over quantified assessment. So Marina, what made me think of that is, well, we both come from the world of recruiting and talent acquisition into HR. So yeah, how would you define success in your role?
Yeah, I mean, Keith and Joe pretty much said it all, but I mean, it's, as you said, you can go into the nitty-gritty data from surveys, from hiring and all of these metrics that are available to you. But often, changes on people's team happen over time. So I think, as I think Keith said it, but it's like the snowball effect that once the teams start functioning properly and they work well, you're going to see it in the business numbers. So you have to look at the bigger picture there. One thing I also just wanted to add to this that hasn't been mentioned, it's and I feel very passionate about it because I feel so many companies are doing it. I wouldn't say wrong, but it's the performance reviews and how you manage people's performance and how you help develop people to perform at their best. And what I've seen for most companies that I would, not all of them, but it is, the process is so heavy that you lose sight on what really matters, which is, people's well-being. It is, supporting them, and it is growing them and their productivity. And I think, you can, I mean, I'm at a point in my life where I really just want to work with smaller teams. So it's not, I mean, I have been working with bigger teams and bigger companies, but I just think there's so much that can be done there to really enable people even more to bring out the better business results.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Thanks, everyone. Hey, we are closing in on the end of this episode. I know it's gone fast. Before we get to my final question, I was just curious if is there anything that you've really all three of you, so just jump in with whoever wants it, but is there anything that you've wanted to say about your role or at all, or about this world of HR people, talent, that you've wanted to say this podcast but haven't had a chance to say yet, or any final thoughts at all? Yeah, I'll just throw it out to the group.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
sure. Go ahead, Marina.
Good.
oh, thank you. Yeah, there's one thing we haven't touched on, but it's an underlying thing that we're all aware of. It's the psychological safety. And it was very interesting because I was asked to facilitate a workshop at DICE, and the topic I chose was that, how to navigate leadership now with people fearing losing their jobs constantly. So on top of everything else that you have going on with your teams, you also have to deal with people fearing. I mean, probably at least half of your team members are probably worrying every day that they might lose their jobs, that we might be next. And so I did some research, and I always kind of thought about psychological safety as not a good to have, and not a comfort, but not. I didn't realize the impact, the scientific impact on the brain, which the psychological safety, which is pretty much the opposite of fear. That it is an essential. It's not optional. It is essential in any company, in any culture. I just want to throw it out there because I found this fascinating, and I encourage everyone to do a bit of research on what happens in your brain when you feel fear.
Yeah, I think maybe I was reading similar research to you, but like there's been some amazing studies on cortisol, like induced, and like how that affects in the workplace. And yeah, ultimately, if you are stressed, like high levels of cortisol in your brain, suddenly all the worst things in work will start to happen. So that's great. Thanks for bringing that up, Marina. That was a really popular topic actually among leadership in both the two previous seasons of this podcast. Everywhere from COOs, CTOs, CFOs, even talking about how they are fully aware of this, especially in games like this, where most people have, if they haven't experienced redundancy, like I saw an article the other day, over half of all people in the games industry right now have experienced redundancy in the last 3 years. Like if you haven't experienced it, then you're at least being worried about it. So yeah, great point. Yeah, Joe, Keith, anything else to add at all?
Yeah, I can jump in. I'll do a little bit of connection, like a lesson learned and how it connects to what I'm doing today a little bit. So
Yeah,
we talked a bit about, what it means to get, credibility of business and, building that credibility and trust. And I think it was Keith and Marina said it, but the curiosity to what they're doing, and you're as a people person, people or people leader, or whatever role you play, you have access to the entire business, finance people, product people, analytics people, and your inquisitiveness increases your business acumen, increases the trust, increases your ability to deliver. And so realizing that those aren't just transactions you're working with, but actually your ability to be curious about what they do will unlock your ability to kind of influence them. And also you can get an MBA in business and product by sitting with people for 15 years, which led me to, once I left EA, to travel around and realize that there's amazing talent and ability to build games out in Africa. And if I can apply what I learned, and now I'm founding a company that's going to be building games, I'm going to be the founder of it. And I'm applying, like, I can't build a P&L, but I can look at it and I know what to bring in. I can do a lot more than I realized. So the amount you can absorb by sitting with smart people and being curious is, don't underestimate that, the amount of what you'll learn and the amount of joy you'll bring to the job and the credibility you'll gain with your leaders, because we all know a lot more than just people and, recruitment.
I'm so glad you said that, because I actually had a conversation recently with some VC folks, and I was like, I'm biased here, but actually the HR and talent skill set is a massive part of the CEO skill set. Like a CEO needs to know everything about their business. At least, doesn't matter if it's shallow, but they need to know everything about the entire company. And also, when we're advising CEOs of startups, or to be honest, CEOs of any size really, the two big things they need to worry about is talent in the company and money in the bank. And that first part, like, you're exactly right. Like, through being an HR business partner and forming all these collaborations, you've just learned crash course in like running a business. So I love
Totally.
that. And best of luck with your news company as well.
Thank you.
Sounds like it's in good hands. So yeah,
We'll see.
nice. Keith, any final thoughts that you weren't able to mention, and if not, anything to reflect on what Marina and Joe have just said?
No, actually, I do want to talk a little bit. I mean, Marina talked about psychological safety, and so this is connected to it, and it's related. You know, when there is fear in an organization, especially in game development, there's a lot of people in the organization who have ideas that would solve some of the problems that we're facing in different parts of the business. Sometimes I might be the leader, and then I'm on the hook, or I'm the one that's going to pay the price because I'm funding this, or Joe's starting a new business, so he's gonna feel all the pressure, and there's a natural tendency to say, I'm going to make all the decisions. I'm just going to tell you what to do because I've experienced these things. And there's a better way to go there. That could be true, but there could be a better way, which is let me listen to the people below that are with me, that also care whether or not the studio stays around or this game is successful or whatever. Like, people are there to do good work and they want to be the best. So let's listen to them. Let's get some feedback. And then let's talk about why we will or will not make a decision based upon what they've brought forward. But let's give them some context so it doesn't, because oftentimes I think people feel like they're screaming into the void and no one ever listens to them. And then they're like, well, now I'm disenfranchised and the game failed. Well, obviously it failed because I knew what the problem was, but nobody listened to me, right? And we don't want that. We want to be successful. Everybody comes to work to be successful. So like, how do we go about doing it? So I think that's one key point, just to kind of touch base on something Marina had said. Most organizations I've been a part of, data is terrible. And I say that pretty broadly. Almost every organization, the data was never where anybody wanted it to be. And so it's hard to evaluate what matters. So to Joe's point earlier, hey, can we get some data that actually shows that we're actually moving the needle on the things that matter the most, whether it's the financials, is it the culture, is it the dial? Like, what does that look like? If we don't have that, then how do we actually get it? How do we get the data? How do we get it correct? You hear the phrase bad data in, bad data out. Well, that's also true. Like, there's a lot of scenarios where the data is just not good. And so how do we streamline that and make that better over time? And then the last thing, I've been in many different industries. Doing the HR function, people and culture function as a whole is fairly consistent. Like, there's some differences in understanding how the business runs, and there's a difference in who is actually in the company and why they're there and how they operate. At the end of the day, what we do is really around like, how are we thinking about the people? How are we thinking about the culture? How are we thinking about growth of that business? And what are the right ways to move those things forward? But it's some ways the HR role is agnostic in different parts of the world. But you have to be curious. You have to step in and understand what the business is and how it operates and who the people are, because people are different everywhere. And what makes success happen is different in different organizations too. Like, we even see that in game development. Like, if one game studio is super successful and has similar skill sets and talent, but how they operate and how they work together and how they partner as a team may be what's the result of them being together for a long period of time. And then they made success versus another team who just cobbled together and threw everybody together and it wasn't successful. Right. So how do we move forward with that? So
Great. Some great points there. I love how transferable the skill set is, but also your second point about, the data and improving that. I always find it interesting that when it comes to HR people and talent roles, you could join a company where from the outside is world-class, and you speak to the tech teams and they're like, we have this proprietary bit of technology that is way ahead compared to the competition. You're like, that is, wow. That's amazing. You have some of the best software engineers on the planet in this company. And then I'm like, cool. Can you just show me what tech you use on the HR side?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, right. Okay. It's, all of the HR tech is held together by bubblegum and duct tape.
That's true.
Yeah. So so I think, I guess my point is, or not all the time, and I'm not throwing shade at any particular companies, right? But yeah, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, brace yourself. You may have to use some, simpler tools on the HR side, whilst even in high tech companies. So yeah,
I love that, Joe, because to that point, one of my coworkers in the LT, we were talking about the systems that we were using for HR, and he was like, "Oh, but can we just build our own? I mean, I'm sure I can gather like 3 or 4 developers over the weekend, and we can build an HR system over the weekend." I was like, "Yeah, dude, no."
that's I've
Wow.
heard that from an engineer multiple times in my life.
Yeah.
That is funny. That's funny you say that. Amazing. Hey, we are reaching the final question here. So, the question I have asked everybody that has been on this podcast so far, is what is your favorite interview question? And so, yeah, I'm gonna throw it to you, Marina. Do you have a favorite interview question?
Yeah, I mean, it's more the type of question. So, as a recruiter, I would always go a little bit beyond the typical just screening questions, because again, I was always super curious. So I knew a lot about the jobs, but I was always really curious to hear about people and who they were, like really who they were. So one question I really, really like is who gets the best version of you at work and who gets the most difficult one? Because that opens up so many doors to so many conversations, and it's so easy to pick up on, like, oh, so you said that, like, can you elaborate? I like these type of questions, but this one I think is really good. It reflects many things.
That's an awesome question. I've never asked that myself, and I don't think I've
Hmm.
ever been asked it. So I love that.
good.
Brilliant. Yeah. Joe, do you have a favorite?
Yeah,
Question?
I mean, it kind of links back to a lot we talked about, but it's a fairly simple one. I like to ask people towards the end of an interview, whether it's a people and talent person or a executive or a game developer, is what types of problems do you like to solve and what types of problems do you not like to solve? Which tells me, do they understand enough about what we just talked about, the company we're in, and have some examples from their past. So they have to synthesize their own personal motivation with an awareness to what problems are being solved at the company and the job they're going into, because every job is solving problems to some extent, mostly. And you get to pick the problems you want to work on. And if there's a misalignment between their motivation or the ability to understand and contextualize the problems that we're solving, the most important thing for the job they're doing, that dissonance is sort of the red flag.
Yeah, brilliant. Nice open question, but you're just diving straight into the weeds of the role and their skills. So yeah, nice. Keith, what's your favorite interview
Yeah, I would
question?
say I was just thinking about Joe's question too, and Marina's both. And one thing I've enjoyed in different companies I've worked for is the transparency of understanding, like the people that I interview and the questions that they ask and the problems that I'm going to solve have been communicated to me. And I love those companies because then I'm like, I know what I'm getting into when I make a decision to go join a company. And then I go to the company, I'm like, oh, it's the exact same thing you guys told me. So perfect.
Yes.
I think that's a really cool thing. To your point, what's my favorite question? I tend to ask a question on like what's the biggest work related failure you've had or experienced, and what did you do about it? And I'm looking for in that question, I actually want to know if somebody's self aware enough that they're willing to say I've made a mistake, because I find that to be one of the biggest challenges, the biggest problems in cultures in general, which is I'm always right, you're always wrong, I'm always ready to point fingers at somebody else, and so it's somebody else's problem. So this is hey, what did I do? And I've had people answer the question and they go, yeah, I can't think of anything. Okay, great. Pass, move on, because clearly you don't have either enough experience or you think you're perfect. Well, like we all make mistakes, and actually you learn more from making a mistake. I always do my job as like I want people to fail small so they can learn, but not like cripple the business at the end of the day, right? How do we go about doing that so they can learn? And there's a cost to that, but what does that look like? The other part is I also want to know, well, what happened? What was the context? And then what did they do about it? Like, was there a learning that came out of it? How did they change the way they operated going forward? And did they do some things like that? And that comes back for me, like formative, early career where I came in and I said something maybe I shouldn't have said, and it caused a lot of churn. And I realized, oh, wait a minute, I made some assumptions about an organization. That's a problem. I need to go back and rethink that. And now I need to be more curious and more inquisitive in my questioning to make sure I truly understand the problem space before I actually answer the questions, right? Like, because there's a reason why they get asked. And I just, they're asked for this reason. No, that wasn't it. And so I learned, but that's a part of the process. So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, great. I love that. If you were to just ask 3 questions in an interview, if you picked exactly these 3 that Keith, Joe, and Marina mentioned, I think you'd be in for some phenomenal answers, and you get into the heart of someone and their skill set very quickly. But we are at the end. We're at the end of this podcast episode. So I just want to say a massive thank you to all three of you for lending your time and unveiling or peeling back the curtain even on what it means to work in the world of HR and people. So yeah, thank you. And I hope I get to see some of you in person very soon. So thanks.
Sounds good.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.